Hi everyone, my name is Sandie Donzica. I'm the artistic director of Confinement, and today I'm going to give a talk in a few minutes about the effects on the dancer's mind, the effects of confinement on the dancer's mind. So I would love for you to join me. I'm going to give a few minutes to make sure everybody can join. This is going to be a conversation, so I would love for you to comment if you can, to share your experience, to share your thoughts, to share your questions as well. And we're going to go through this together and examine how this situation is for dancers. How do we live this confinement? How does it change our mentality? How does it change our training? How do we feel about it? And how do we go from there? So the idea is that this talk is a continuity of the series I created called Cultivating Freedom Within. So the first improvisation workshop was about starting to free the body and redefining the limit of our space, the limit of our bodies, and seeing how we can expand from within. But now I think for the second part that in order to fully free the body, we have to study the mind and free the mind. And I think a lot of issues might come up for the dancer's mind in confinement. So we're going to talk about it together. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to join. And then we'll start. So I will be on my computer at the same time, so I will be able to see your comments, your ideas. So don't hesitate to participate. And let me know if you hear me well. That's extremely important as well. Hi, we're going to start in a few minutes. We're going to talk about the effects of confinement on the dancer's mind. So obviously it's very hard for all artists around the world to be in the situation of confinement. You brought up a lot of issues for us, but I'm going to study specifically what happens to the dancer mind and dancer mentality while we are in confinement. So I'm still waiting a few minutes to have more people joining, and this is more going to be a conversation and a debate if we wish. So please feel free to comment, to ask questions, to share personal experiences, to share your point of view. I think it's very important for us to share our different visions and the way we go about this, how we go through this. It's especially hard for us in Texas right now, since we don't really have an end in mind. So we can't really know when we'll be able to go back to the stage, to go back to training, to go back to our company, to our teachers, to our students. So together we're gonna analyze what's happening to us. What are we truly missing about our career? What we can't have, we can't do within our confined space? What does it produce on our mind? But then after that, we're going to see if we can acknowledge what we might have lost, what we might have not met, what changed, what we cannot obtain right now. And see if by letting go of that, we can actually discover now what we might actually have gained or saved during confinement, what we might have discovered, what actually, even if we did something completely different from our practice, completely different from even our career, what it might have brought to us, and if by the end, when we eventually get out of confinement, can we actually become better dancers by the end of that, better artists, better human together? So yes, again, a few minutes, and then we're gonna start to talk about it. All right, 1 minute, and we're doing it. Can you all hear me well? I hope so. All right. All right. Well, here we go. We're gonna start. Making sure all is set up. And here we go. So welcome to the second part of the series I created for my company Confinement and through Articulate Austin, called Cultivating Freedom Within. So this is the second part. It started as an improvisation workshop that was taught through Facebook, where the goal was to actually start to free the body, to find more space, to expand our confined space, and to expand the limits we can see in space and in our body, to find a little more freedom within and to expand from within. Now the second part is going to be about the mind of the dancer. I found that in order to continue the freeing process of the body, we have to address the mind. If the mind doesn't want to go there, then the body will not want to go there. So the second part is a talk about the effects of confinement on the dancer's mind. So, what can confinement produce on the dancer mentality? What he can do in our bodies and in our mind? It's a very complex question, as of course we can all react in a different way. But we have a lot of common points about that. I think it's very important to address first what is actually hard about our new situation. I think that understanding that our job cannot be done within our confined space is the first key. We cannot dance, we cannot perform from a confined space without other people. That's important to know. That's not what dance truly is. So it's true that it's already difficult. We take off our natural environment, we take off our floor, we take off our space, we take off our audience, we take off our dancers, our fellow dancers, our community. So it's important to acknowledge that. Of course, we can be positive. We know that we didn't lose everything, but it's important to know that yes, of course, for now, it is difficult. Some things are gone at the moment. So yes, dance cannot be done in such a tiny space. For dancers, we do need space to expand. It has also an effect on the mind. If you are in a small space, then you feel restricted, then you might feel smaller. So all that goes together. We need enough space, of course, if we need to jump, to leap, to go through the space. So in order to expand the body, we need to have sufficient space. Dancers also need specific flooring, so to not cause injury in our bodies, mostly when we fall and when we jump, we need a very specific type of flooring, a type of marley with some specific floating wood under, that it's made to support our weight and to help us rebound on the floor, to catch our weight and then bounce back the dynamic of that, if that made sense. So yes, we need proper space, we need proper flooring, but we also need our community, which means that of course we can dance alone, but we do need our other dancers. We need the connection with them. And that's something that is hard to get right now, because physically we cannot see really other dancers, and most importantly, we cannot touch. And the touch between dancers is very important. It's extremely beautiful to notice that on stage, but it's extremely intense to feel as well for dancers, to feel the physical connection that they have with other fellow dancers. So it's true that for now we don't have the space, we don't have the floor, so technically it's a little hard to practice, to dance, to perform. We don't have our community and our dancers, so we don't have this connection with our group, with our community. And also, extremely important as well, we don't have our audience, which means we are not able to perform. So that means for now, we've been taking, that situation took away from us almost the goal, one of the goals of our practice, the performance. We cannot perform. What is it to perform? We cannot perform in front of an audience. So we don't have a live audience. We don't have a live reaction. We don't have the natural, symbiotic, spontaneous connection with the audience. We don't have that. So yes, I mean, we can acknowledge that. It's true that what really defines our profession is not there. We don't have what we need to fully exert our job, our career. We don't have that. As teachers, we don't have our students. We don't have the connection with them. It's exactly the same thing. As dancers, we don't have the connection with our choreographer, with our company. As a choreographer, we cannot really share with our dancer the same way. So all this is extremely different for us. It's like we are starting to learn to operate on a completely different level. It's almost like we're learning a new job. So it is important first, I'm sure we all realize that, but it is important to understand that yes, it's true. There's some things we cannot do right now. There's some things that don't work the same way. We cannot really actually fully do our job in this situation. So what do we do with that? We don't have the adequate space. We don't necessarily have the connection we used to have with the dancers, with our community. We don't have the opportunity to really perform with an audience. We don't necessarily have a proper feedback. We don't have our teachers. We don't have our choreographers. We don't have our audience. And I mean, for some of us, for choreographers, for artistic directors, then we kind of lost an entire season. We don't have the shows that we were about to do. We kind of lost some opportunities. Obviously, financially, we lost a lot of gigs and a lot of money. Probably partnerships, and sometimes we lost grants. So on very different levels, it's extremely different for dancers, choreographers, artistic directors, teachers. So now this can lead to the question that what is it that is so irreplaceable in dance? Because truly dance could be personal. It's a sensation through the body. So technically, purely, if you strip everything away, you could take the floor away, you could take the audience away, you can take the teacher away, you could take everything away. Our passion for dance should survive within that. So what is it that in dance, in our job, is so precious, that we crave to have, that we deeply need to have? So of course, I think on a normal time, it's important for us to have proper floor, proper space, all of that. It's important for us to perform well, to train well. But at the end, what is it that we miss the most? What is it that makes, dance? And so one idea would be that it could be the connection with the audience, which means that dancing alone would be nice, but dance is not necessarily just a personal practice. It is made to connect with other people. So what do we do? What do we do that is so special with the audience? What do we create that we cannot really do right now virtually? So you're welcome to comment and to give your thoughts. For me, I would say that it's actually the raw connection that we establish, that it's an emotional connection that we do that is live with the audience. That's extremely important. Same thing with our fellow dancers. I don't think this is a feeling, this is an emotion that we can fully reproduce virtually. So maybe that's a good questioning to have. What is it that is so deep, so pure about live performance, about dancing with other people? So yes, personally, I would say that it's definitely the sensation you have, the connection, the pure moment of connection you have with the other human beings. But feel free to send me your thoughts. I would definitely love to see what you think about that. In the meantime, we can continue our conversation. Let's take some examples, for example. If this is really the human connection, the energy in the room, the transmission of emotion that we miss, that it's really hard to reproduce in these conditions, then what's the difference? We could say we can go virtual, which we probably all did. We go virtual. That's another way to do that. And sometimes it works really well, but can it actually fully replace what we do usually? Is it the same thing to, for example, for a dancer rehearse via Zoom, then rehearse in the studio? Well, obviously it's extremely different. To rehearse on Zoom is hard because you're in your own space, you don't have the proper space, and you don't have the real connection with a choreographer. If you're choreographing with a dancer, it's the same thing. You don't apply the technique the same way, you cannot see the dancer the same way, you cannot feel really the connection with the dancer the same way. Same for teaching, obviously. And it's also a very different experience for the artist to also perform without the audience, without the physical audience, and without the reaction of the audience. So that is extremely different. However, we all kind of switched in one way or the other to virtual performances, to digital art. So there's some good and bad things about it. So what was bothering or hard for us is that we were forced to switch so fast to the digital art. Dance on film, for example, is a totally different job than choreographing for the stage, live performance. It's a totally different job, totally different. It's dance, obviously, but it's not the same skill, it's not the same audience, it's not the same purpose. So we have to move the way we work, change our creation process to fit a new type of audience, a new type of seeing the work, and so therefore we have to change our work to adapt to that. So it's a very profound change, but it's not at all the same thing. Watching a show, a dance show on a screen is not the same experience than watching a dance show live. You don't necessarily hear the breath, you don't really see exactly what happens to the body, you don't feel the energy of the dancers in the room. So you're less part of the experience when you see it on the screen, you have the division of the screen. So it's a totally different experience. But for now, that's still something good to do because we're still able to provide some art to the audience and we're still able to express ourselves through that. But it's important to know that it is not replacing our art. It's not that easy. Oh, I used to do show live, now I do things online. Same. No, not the same at all. Totally different work. So what is it that we truly miss of our career that we can't have or reproduce within these conditions? So we talked about things we would need that we don't have. But at the seed of that, what is the pure need, what's missing, what's lacking, what are we craving for? Can we understand that? So as dancers, it's much more than, oh, I miss the floor and I miss the teacher. We miss a lot of things. So if we focus, for example, on the collective, missing the collective, we feel alone. We have a hard time to produce, to create alone by ourselves. We miss the other people, the collective. Then we can think for ourselves, we can have a little reflection on what do I miss exactly about the collective? Do I miss the energy of the other people in the room? Do I miss the feedback? Do I miss the partnerships that I create? The physical connection that there is? The energy of the room building up? That's one thing. But I might also miss a kind of competitivity. Competition that we can find in the studio. I mean, we know that's also part of the dance world. And competitivity is not necessarily bad. It could be a good thing. Sometimes it drives us forward. Sometimes to have other people in the room that might be better technically on something very specific drives us forward, make us want to do better, to be better, give us an example. So it can be actually really good. But then we can deeply think about that personally. Like, what is it that I miss? Do I miss to be challenged by others? Do I miss to be seen by others? What is at the seed of my emotion? So I don't have a specific answer to that. Of course, it's extremely personal. But then, if in analyzing our desires and our fears about our career, we can learn more about ourselves. But we can also learn more about our fields. And like, for example, right now in this conversation, we can understand that competitivity is a part of our world, but it's not necessarily bad. It can drive us forward. But we have to understand how much competitivity we're missing, how much comparison to others we're looking for, we need to be. Let me know if you have thoughts about that, dancers, in comments, how you feel about that. If you feel like competitivity, being with others, comparing yourself to others, is actually something that makes you move forward. And it can make you move forward in a negative mindset or in a positive mindset. But is that something that you feel? Is that something that you miss? Performing, for example, if we deeply miss performing, what is it emotionally, deeply, that we crave about the performance? Is it necessarily the praise that we might feel? The praise, the applause, the praise from the audience, the praise of our choreographer, the praise of our fellow dancers? Is that we miss? Is that the self-assurance? Through that, is it maybe, because probably it helps us define ourselves as dancers also, obviously, the reactions we get from the audience and from the others. So is it what we deeply miss about performance? Or what it could also be, hopefully, is the pure connection we have with the audience and we have with our dancers. It's the feeling we have when we're on stage. But now then, for ourselves individually, we can analyze like this feeling that we love on stage. Is it a feeling of being seen, of being the performer, or is it a feeling of creating the connection? So I think it's food for thought. Obviously, it's always a balance, a different ratio for everyone. Obviously, we are performers, so we like to be on the stage. We like to be forward in some kind of way. But it's a good thought to have, because if you think that you might be performing for a little more selfish reasons, superficial reasons, then you can have your own reflection and start to understand then what is the true goal of performing. Why is performance important for all of us, not necessarily just for the dancer? How could it be important for the audience? So what is my role in the performance? As a performer, am I necessarily at the center of this exchange, or on the contrary, I'm the link with the audience? Now, if we continue with the feelings that might have arisen during confinement, we might have a hard time acknowledging some goals that we might not have met, that we might have had before, that right now it's not necessarily possible to attain. So let's say maybe we have a different physique, we have different strength right now, different flexibility, that change. Obviously it's normal, it changed, we don't have the same setting. So now we can think of what does it produce within us, which means let's say we have different body. We don't have the body that we used to have. We don't necessarily have the body that we want to have as dancers. Well, what does it say about us? Does it do that influence our minds? Now, as dancers, of course it does. But why does it do that so much? Do we feel like we need to have a body dancer? A body of a dancer, sorry, a dancer's body? And what does that really mean to have a dancer's body? So it's interesting to understand the images that we have in our minds. When we think of a dancer, we think of a specific type of body, or the ballet body, or the contemporary body, for example. Now we're starting to make the difference between the two. But there is a specific type that we have in mind. So we feel as dancers that we need to be athletic, we need to be tall, thin, lean, strong. But right now, maybe we're not. It happens, maybe we're not. Does that mean that we're less of a dancer for this? Does that mean that we don't meet all the requirements anymore? And now we can think like, does your body type have to be a requirement to fully be a dancer? Is it necessarily what happens visually, only visually with dance, that is important? Is it necessarily the lean, graceful body that's interesting to see? So that tells a lot, like the relationship we have with our body and with our visual, how we look like, our aesthetic, and what we think what dance is. Because if we boil that to the end, we don't necessarily have to have a specific body for dance. Obviously, we need to have we need to have a good condition, good physical condition to do whatever we need to do. But visually doesn't change a lot to have certain lines or not other lines. Is it the line that's necessarily important in what we give to the audience? Another thing we might think about during this confinement is the idea of technical performance. We might feel like right now we're not able to meet the technique level that we want. It's possible. Again, it's totally excusable. We don't have a way to fully practice well. We're not in the right mindset to practice. So we might feel like technically we're not where we would like to be. That can also tell something about our practice and something about our field. If we become obsessed with this technique, feeling like we're losing the technique, feeling like we're not progressing in the technique, feel like we're not practicing enough the technique, what does that mean exactly? Of course, technique is a big part of dance. It's extremely important. It's part of lineage. It's part of how you can master your body is through different techniques. But becoming obsessed with a technique that we might have or not have, what does it tell about our vision of dance? Are dancers necessarily just athletes? Are we only dancers because we're extremely good in one specific technique? Like, what does technique mean to us? Because at the end, if we go back to the idea of dancing, the pure pleasure, passion of dancing, if we have a dancer that doesn't have a very specific technique, let's say that it's very popular among dancers, ballet, contemporary, modern, that dancer doesn't have this technique. But this dancer is extremely passionate, still has a high control of his or her body, and masters her energies in such a deep way that it's moving to see, that it touches the audience. To me, that's a dancer. It's a dancer. There's a mastering of energies. There's a mastering of the connection with the audience, and it's not necessarily, and that also doesn't necessarily has the technique that we think about. So it's interesting to see what we focus on during this tough time. Focus on the body image, the technical performance. Also, the idea of progress. It's true that as dancer, and it's very healthy for us, we always want to progress. We always progressing in our mind. We always want to progress. We want to be better. We always want to have a better technique. We always want to be more expressive, to be more specific, precise, and it's extremely good and healthy for us. That's how we get better. That's how we deepen our practice. That's how we become better artists. But right now, it's kind of tough to keep this mentality, this need, this want, this deep desire of progress. Because right now we might feel, for some of us, we all have different environments obviously, but for some of us, the progress might not be feasible. It might not be possible to progress. We might not have what we need to progress. We might try as hard as we can, but it might be impossible right now. So if we lose this progress, we lose this idea of progress, what does it say to me? If I'm not progressing, what does that mean to me? If I'm not progressing, that means I'm regressing. That means I'm losing. Because progressing is technically to get better. So yes, right now, sometimes we might not have this idea, specific idea that we had of progressing. But sometimes it's interesting to think that if I'm not progressing, I'm not necessarily losing. I'm not necessarily stopping. So yeah, what does that tell about me? Do I need to progress all the time? Do I need to go up, 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 up? Can I go back up? Can I allow myself to live in a different way, to feel in a different way, then to come back more creative? So yes, you can absolutely comment and tell me your thoughts about that. Like, what do we do with this need of progressing during confinement? So I'm gonna take a break for 1 minute and come back, and then we're gonna keep talking about it. So see you in a minute. We're back.
So Kyle called me. I guess Savannah responded to his email. He hadn't read it yet. So.
What did he say?
So, we are back. Let's continue on that. Please let me know if you have any questions. And of course, share your thoughts. It's highly welcome. So back to it. There's a few more things we can think about. It's true that we might feel like we have a hard time to meet our goals. We don't have the same pathway anymore, right? Before, it worked really well for us and in our career to set very specific goals and to work really hard to reach them. But right now we don't have a timeline, so we can't plan. And sometimes our goals are not necessarily achievable right now. So that can tell a lot about the way we function usually. Usually it works really well for us to work like that. It works really well. But it depends in which balance. Which means, for example, if we're a young dancer and we have a very specific goal of entering in a very specific company, it can be healthy in a way that we work really hard in a specific technique. We work as hard as we can to achieve something specific. But at the end, we need to put that goal in perspective, which means that in dance world, for example, it's rare to think when you're really young that you want to enter this specific company and then in the end you enter in this specific company. It doesn't necessarily work like that. So it's important to understand that our goals are driving us. But if we are too closed-minded on this goal, we might actually lose some precious aspects of the path, the process. So actually confinement is a good time to put that in perspective. How do I see my career? How do I see my goals? What do they mean to me? How do I do to access to them? But what happens if I don't access to them? What can I still gain on the way? And then finally, we might still have this thought in confinement of what we are supposed to do or to be as dancers. I am a dancer. I still need to train every day. I still need to keep my flexibility. I still need to keep my strength. I still need to work on my expression. I still need to have this kind of body. So we have this very strong type in our head of what we are supposed to be, to do as dancers, even during a pandemic. So I think now is a good time to release some kind of pressure that we might have. We're always under pressure, obviously. We always want to be the best, to be at the top, to do as much as we can. That's how it works. But now, when we're not able to maintain that fully, what can we do with that? Do we want to push through, like we do usually in the studio? That's how we do. Or do we want to, on the contrary, take another perspective, maybe relax a little bit, let go a little bit, to come back to it better later? So it's two different ways. And some of us are taking the two different ways. Some of us keep pushing as much as they can. And some of us decided to release to then go back to it. And so it all depends on what you have. For example, if you have a more or less good environment to keep training, then yes, keep training at a certain amount of time. But if you overtrain in an environment that is not suited for it, then that can lead to injury. So it's all about the balance. For example, if you have extremely strong goals, you were developing a specific technique, you were training really hard before, and you realize that actually you cannot do that right now, it's not possible. Maybe it's also a good idea to release for now this part of the technique, to train on a different technique that you're able to do, or different fitness exercise, to then keep getting these complementary skills to your technique, to then when you have the opportunity, come back to it the right way. So that's an option. You can let me know what you think in the comments and tell me how you see that. So yes, through this thought process, we might end up actually redefining what dance is to us and what it means truly to be a dancer. If right now it's not necessarily our physical level, strength level, flexibility, or ability to perform, we are still dancers and we'll always be dancers. So what is it for us that is the seed of our job, of what we do? Personal thoughts. All right, so now that we saw what the problems are, it's important to mourn these problems, to then celebrate. So to mourn what we think we might have lost, what we think we don't have right now, to then celebrate the things that we do have. So for me, I think it is extremely important to understand that things are not the same. We can be sad about it, we can be distraught about it. Of course, it's really far from what we used to have, what we used to do, what we do. So indeed, we might have lost a lot, but it's important to acknowledge and embrace that we might be failing right now to meet standards that we held pre-pandemic. That doesn't mean that we are totally failing, not at all. We're not able to achieve what we wanted before, indeed. We might have regressed in some areas, indeed. But are we less of a dancer for this? Did we lose our worth, our uniqueness, our excellence as dancers? Should we continue to push through when we obviously can't? So sometimes it's important to think that we have to learn to let go of certain things, to let it die, rather than to hold on to the pain and the despair, like we might have done before. That was our process before. But maybe right now would be a good time to save what we have, to continue later, to let go of certain things, to bring them back later. So yes, some of us might feel completely lost right now, which I totally understand. But at the end, in the middle of the pandemic, is there anything wrong with the fact that we're not meeting our goals? We're not meeting our standards? Should we blame ourselves for this? It's important to understand that as dancers, that even if we are losing some strength, losing something, before we would think it's because of us, we didn't work hard enough. But right now, it's not our fault at all. We're not really able to meet any of the goals that we had, any of the standards that we had. So it's not blameable since we are in a global pandemic. So that can put our problems a little bit in perspective. So here we are. Here comes the celebration. By acknowledging all that I said previously, we'll be able to find a bit more peace and to move forward if we wish. So yes, we probably didn't do what we're supposed to do these past few months. But what did we do? That's extremely important to think about too. Sometimes we focus too much on what we lost, what we don't have, but what do we have? What do we still have? So obviously we still have our body. We still have the ability to dance. But even though, like, let's say, we did live a little more loosely, maybe we took time to do different activities that we don't do usually. Did more yoga, did more bike, we read, we watched a Netflix show we really wanted to watch. Maybe we slept really long nights, maybe we enjoyed food even more. Maybe we had what we thought was a normal life, a less segmented, goal-driven life, but a looser life. And maybe that's not wrong. Maybe that's not wrong. Or maybe some of us, we cried for many days. We didn't feel like moving from the couch. We completely refused the situation, and that is not wrong either. The good news is that in both cases, we freed something within ourselves. We freed our emotions. For example, the laziness, we might have called it laziness that we felt, might actually have been a recovering phase for our bodies. The creative void at some point that we might have had might be a moment of replenishment. Indulging in more and different food might be actually bringing crucial nutrients to our bodies. It might also teach us in a different way how our body works and how to handle that, how to find better balance. Maybe at the end we did everything we could to just not fall apart. Maybe we took care of ourselves. We did things that made us feel good, just so we can hold on. We can go through this phase. And in both ways, it's totally okay. Just taking care of yourself and not falling apart, just remaining where you are is already an achievement. So if we put these two in the balance, it's a kind of scheme that we really understand. What we lost, what we gained. Let's see what happened. What did we lose, what we gained, or what did we possibly saved? Just kind of gaining. So, if we focus on the career specifically, if we focus on the dance aspect, so we already talked about what we lost, right? We might have lost some opportunities, some shows, audience. We might have lost some technique, some physicality, all that. We talked about it. But what did we gain? Maybe, possibly. Well, we were all kind of forced to go virtual. So it taught us a lot of skills that we didn't have before. We started to dance and to choreograph for the screen. So we started to create in a way that was probably shorter, that was made for 2D, that was so more performative in a shorter amount of time to be seen from a screen. So we learned a lot of important skills that could be useful for the marketing of our company, for the marketing of our brand, but we also learned a different type of art, which brought us totally different new ideas. Maybe now we started to to work in a way that's extremely more visual, that's extremely more aesthetic. We found a new aesthetic, maybe working a lot more with lights, with costumes, with very specific movements, and maybe before we're working more on the process, on the energy, on something completely different. So we discovered another aspect of them somehow. We discovered new skills by doing that. We also discovered, maybe for some of us, if we were dancers in a company, then we had a lot of time alone. Then if we danced for many, many years with a big company, for example, to be alone and to rediscover movement alone can be very beneficial, because you can start to understand your own way of moving, your own language, not necessarily the language of the choreographer, the language of the company, but the language that emerges from you. So actually, by being left alone, you have more time to research and to understand yourself. So maybe somehow you start to refine even more the quality of your movements. Some of us also, because we were not able to dance in a studio, started to dance outside. So in there, we also were able to develop maybe a deeper connection with nature, to find how our body could expand even more into the world, the nature, like outside of the studio. We're able to get inspired from the sensations we get from the grass, from the wind, from the water. And all that is extremely replenishing for us creatively and physically. We're rediscovering new sensation that this time we had a lot of time to explore. Another really good thing too, if we think about it, is because everybody went online, we were able actually to connect with dancers from around the world, from around the globe. A lot of teachers from many different countries started to post their classes online. So like a technique or a class you wanted to experience that you were never able to, it was a different continent, then you could do it. Obviously not in the same conditions, but at least you could actually get a taste of it. So we shared among dancers all over the world a lot more techniques, a lot more tips, and a lot more work than usual. So maybe during this time, this hard time, you actually took time to discover a lot of different types of work that you didn't know before. You started to understand like what happens in the dance world in Australia, in Germany, in other countries, everywhere. So somehow it connected us even more. It connected us internationally. So yes, that's what happens career-wise. You know, I think we're now able to understand that there's actually a lot of skills we can get from this situation. Even if it's not exactly what we wanted at first, there's a lot we can take from it. So yes, to sum up, for example, the virtual skills are very important. Choreographing for the screen, getting a new sense of your aesthetic, understanding your own personal movements, rediscovering your connection to nature when dancing outside, and finally connecting with dancers worldwide, being able to see shows from the entire world, be able to experience techniques from the entire world. Now, humanly, if we don't think about career, let's say we're not in right medicine to take class, we didn't want to work out a lot, we're not there yet, we're not ready yet. That's fine too. We probably discovered a lot of other things too. Even by not necessarily training, by not necessarily trying, we actually gained things. Let's say that we rested a lot, we slept a lot, we didn't do much, then we actually recovered for our body. Dancers may have a lot of chronic or minus injuries over time, like we have tired bodies, and it happens often. So having a long time of rest can be actually beneficial for us, because it's a long time of rest we usually never ever get. We spend a lot more time with family, so we deepen the connections that we have with our household, if we're with our family or spouse. We took time to replenish our creativity, because even without knowing it, if you read books, if you watch different things on TV, if you watch the birds outside. But just taking time off for your brain to just experience the world and the art the way you see it, you already replenish your creativity. So even if you don't exercise your creativity, by seeing, smelling, touching, sensing, you are replenishing it. Also, what happened is we might have allowed emotions to fully go through our body, which means we might have been on a roller coaster eventually of emotions, but we're actually able to maybe not process it yet, but at least to put it out. So maybe we actually fully experience our emotion instead of suppressing it because we were going forward, not never stopping. Finally, we let go of that and we let the emotion out. And when it's out, then that's when we can understand it, process it, use it if we want. So at the end, we might actually be able to understand ourselves better because without, how do we say that? Without strict guidance from somebody else or that we put on ourselves, we are a little loose. But then by being a little loose, we actually understand our natural ways. We understand how our body likes to move, how we like to eat, how we like to sleep, what we like to do, what our tendency, when we're tired, when we're not. We're starting to understand the natural cycles of our body. But we're also starting to understand maybe our minds a little better, how our emotions work, and eventually how to deal with them. So, finally, what did we learn from this insane journey? True, we don't have to say it's a great journey. It's true, it's really tough. It's a little tough for a lot of people, and for dancers, it's really tough. We assess that, we know that. So we don't necessarily have to be happy about it if we don't want to. But what emerged? What really happened? How can we use that experience? This might actually be a very deep learning process for us if we allow it. We might gain a lot. We have a lot of time of reflection. We have a lot of time to actually understand. By removing what we had before, what we thought was secure, now we really understand if we really needed what was secure, if we really needed that or not, how we feel without it. Do we feel bad just because of the lack of it, or it was really that we need? So if we actually take the time, if we pause, if we really reflect on how we feel, on our emotions, on what we miss, what we want, and what we're actually doing right now, we might eventually come out of this maybe better dancers and better artists and, of course, better humans. So I think there's a different ways to see that. Of course, whenever we're gonna come back to the studio eventually, it's gonna take us a long time to come back to the real deal. We all know that. But if we take the time to understand our bodies, to understand our mind, to understand what we can actually get from this situation, then we can come back with a clearer mind and a better perspective on our career, on our dance world, on our practice, and on our goals or desires, or what we really want to do. And finally, at the end, we might understand what is actually truly important to us. So yeah, those were my 2 cents. Obviously, it's my own reflection, not necessarily my personal vision, but my reflection on the subject. So you might have a different idea, you might have a totally different experience, and I would love to hear from it. Of course, depending on where we are in the world, we definitely have, a different environment, a different timeline too. For example, if you're an artist, let's say in Berlin, you might have had several weeks of confinements that were really hard, obviously, but you knew when the end was coming, and the end finally came, and you're able to come back. So you had a pause, and then you come back. For us right now, we don't even know when this is gonna stop. So that's why I'm having this conversation today. Is not knowing, not being able to plan, then what can we do? How can we process the situation? What can we do to feel better, maybe going forward, and eventually use that experience to make us better artists in the end? So yes, that's what I had to say today. I hope it was either helpful or insightful. Please send me comments, email me, messages, whatever you want. If you want to share your experience, I would love to talk with you further about that. I think it's really important for us to keep the connections of us together. We might feel very alone sometimes, even though we have social media and everything. We're still missing that contact, that physical contact. And what we love the most, performing and dancing with others. So it's important for us to stay connected, to stay in touch, and to feel free to fully experience all of our emotions, tough or good, to fully go within that. We have time to experiment. We have time to understand ourselves. We don't have a lot of pressure right now. We shouldn't have pressure. It's a world pandemic, so we take it one day at a time. So thank you for listening to me, and I hope to hear from you soon. Bye-bye.